Theme 9. History. Gap filling. Reading 1. The history of shoes. In the past, importance was not given to shoes being comfortable or fashionable. These early foot coverings were probably animal skins, which people tied around their ankles during cold weather. We still use leather today, but other materials such as silk, plastic or cotton are also popular depending on what is in fashion. It was only 150 years ago that people began to wear a different shoe on each foot. Formerly, the two shoes had been straight instead of shaped and could be worn on the left or on the right foot. All shoes used to be made by hand, but now, although there are shoemakers still using their traditional skills, most shoes are now machine-made in large factories. The introduction of sewing machines allowed the shoe industry to produce large quantities of cheaper shoes for a wider range of buyers. Theme 9. History. Gap filling. Reading 2. English spelling. Why does English spelling have a reputation for being difficult? English was first written down when Christian monks came to England in Anglo-Saxon times. They used the 23 letters of Latin to write down the sounds of Anglo-Saxon speech as they heard it. However, English has a wider range of basic sounds, over 40, than Latin. The alphabet was too small, and so combinations of letters were needed to express the different sounds. Inevitably, there were inconsistencies in the way that letters were combined. With the Norman invasion of England, the English language was put at risk. English survived, but the spelling of many English words changed to follow French patterns, and many French words were introduced into the language. The result was more irregularity. When the printing press was invented in the 15th century, many early printers of English texts spoke other first languages. They made little effort to respect English spelling. Although one of the short-term effects of printing was to produce a number of variant spellings, in the long term it created fixed spellings. People became used to seeing words spelt in the same way. Rules were drawn up and dictionaries were put together which printers and writers could refer to. However, spoken English was not fixed and continued to change slowly, just as it still does now. Letters that were sounded in the Anglo-Saxon period, like the K in knife, now become silent. Also, the pronunciation of vowels then had little in common with how they sound now, but the way they are spelt hasn't changed. No wonder then that it is often difficult to see the link between sound and spelling. Theme 9. History. Reading Comprehension. Reading 1. Early peoples had no need of engineering works to supply their water. Hunters and nomads camped near natural sources of fresh water, and populations were so sparse that pollution of the water supply was not a serious problem. After community life developed and agricultural villages became urban centres, the problem of supplying water became important for inhabitants of a city, as well as for irrigation of the farms surrounding the city. Irrigation works were known in prehistoric times, and before 2000 BC, the rulers of Babylonia and Egypt constructed systems of dams and canals to impound the floodwaters of the Euphrates and Nile rivers, controlling floods and providing irrigation water throughout the dry season. Such irrigation canals also supplied water for domestic purposes. The first people to consider the sanitation of their water supply were the ancient Romans, who constructed a vast system of aqueducts to bring the clean waters of the Apennine Mountains into the city, and built basins and filters along these mains to ensure the clarity of the water. The construction of such extensive water supply systems declined when the Roman Empire disintegrated, and for several centuries, local springs and wells formed the main source of domestic and industrial water. The invention of the force pump in England in the middle of the 16th century greatly extended the possibilities of development of water supply systems. In London, the first pumping waterworks was completed in 1562. It pumped river water to a reservoir about 37 metres above the level of the River Thames, and from the reservoir the water was distributed by gravity through lead pipes to buildings in the vicinity. Increased per capita demand has coincided with water shortages in many countries. South East England, for example, receives only 14% of Britain's rainfall, has 30% of its population, and has experienced declining winter rainfall since the 1980s. In recent years, a great deal of interest has been shown in the conversion of seawater to fresh water to provide drinking water for very dry areas, such as the Middle East. Several different processes, including distillation, electrodialysis, reverse osmosis, and direct freeze evaporation, have been developed for this purpose. Some of these processes have been used in large facilities in the United States. Although these processes are successful, the cost of treating seawater is much higher than that for treating fresh water. Theme 9. History. Reading Comprehension. Reading 2. Archaeological records, paintings, drawings, and carvings of humans engaged in activities involving the use of hands indicate that humans have been predominantly right-handed for more than 5,000 years. In ancient Egyptian artwork, for example, the right hand is depicted as the dominant one in about 90% of the examples. Fracture or wear patterns on tools also indicate that a majority of ancient people were right-handed. Cro-Magnon cave paintings, some 27,000 years old, commonly show outlines of human hands made by placing one hand against the cave wall and applying paint with the other. Children today make similar outlines of their hands with crayons on paper. With few exceptions, left hands of Cro-Magnons are displayed on cave walls, indicating that the paintings were usually done by right-handers. Anthropological evidence pushes the record of handedness in early human ancestors back to at least 1.4 million years ago. One important line of evidence comes from flaking patterns of stone cores used in toolmaking. Implements flaked with a clockwise motion, indicating a right-handed toolmaker, can be distinguished from those flaked with a counterclockwise rotation, indicating a left-handed toolmaker. Even scratches found on fossil human teeth offer clues. Ancient humans are thought to have cut meat into strips by holding it in between their teeth and slicing it with stone knives, as do the present-day Inuit. Occasionally the knives slip and leave scratches on the user's teeth. Scratches made with a left-to-right stroke direction by right-handers are more common than scratches in the opposite direction made by left-handers. Still other evidence comes from cranial morphology. Scientists think that physical differences between the right and left sides of the interior of the skull indicate subtle physical differences between the two sides of the brain. The variation between the hemispheres corresponds to which side of the body is used to perform specific activities. Such studies, as well as studies of tool use, indicate that right or left-sided dominance is not exclusive to modern Homo sapiens. Populations of Neanderthals, such as Homo erectus and Homo habilis, seem to have been predominantly right-handed, as we are.